A fully equipped Abrams weighs over 70 tons and is roughly 8 meters long, much longer than the Taiwan's current M60 tanks, which weigh close to 55 tons and are less than 7 meters long. And that's what some say is the problem. Their size could make them unsuitable for Taiwan's dense major cities. For more on Taiwan's new tanks and how they could be used in the conflict, our reporter Jaime Ocon spoke to Raymond Kuo, a security analyst at the RAND Corporation.
So Raymond, Taiwan has reportedly received the first batch of these new U.S. Abrams tanks. I want to first ask, how are these tanks going to be used in Taiwan's defense?
Now, for this particular Abrams component, the idea is that, if there's, in case of an invasion, you need some kind of ground force with which to repel the attack, particularly in terms of beachheads. If the Chinese can establish a beachhead in one of those was it 14, I think, red beaches? Well, you need to have something there that can knock them back into the sea. Tanks can be one of those things, but there are also a variety of other kind of operational strategies that we can discuss, other tactics we can discuss that might be more cost effective. It's, at least in my mind, there's a fairly limited role. It's almost kind of like a break glass kind of emergency. If the Chinese have a beachhead, that's when you use these guys.
Now, these tanks are pretty massive, and given how dense some of Taiwan's major cities are, do you think these tanks are suitable for this kind of terrain?
In terms of an urban environment, no, the Abrams tanks are not suited whatsoever. Tanks tend to do extremely poorly when they're in an urban environment because you can just kind of toss things down to the top of them where they have the thinnest armor. Also, they're very, very heavy. And so just rolling a tank down the street will pretty much tear up most streets. Bridges have to be made so that they can support the weight of such a vehicle as well. Now, so in an urban environment, the tanks tend to have relatively little utility. That said, there are geographic situations pertinent to Taiwan where they could have an impact or a pretty decisive impact. So, for example, if we're talking about beachheads, and so in rough terrain, you will want tracked heavy vehicles. You also want armor that can withstand, say, artillery barrages. The expectation is that China will be barraging these beaches or kind of the surrounding areas. So, if you want to dislodge that beachhead, you need a vehicle that can actually survive that kind of force.
These tanks are a bit of a deviation from the smaller asymmetric weapons route that many people say that Taiwan should be following. Do you think that these tanks are still a positive step in Taiwan's defense?
Taiwan has been investing quite a lot in the asymmetric capabilities. I think, if I recall correctly, it produces more anti-ship missiles than the United States does. Now, there's a question about modernization of those systems. Do I think that there's a possibility that Taiwan would leave the asymmetric defense? I think the biggest thing in my mind is not operational necessity, but more about politics. There's also a prestige angle as well. I've written about this in the past that because Taiwan doesn't have a security commitment from the United States, it needs to take signals of, U.S. commitment wherever it can find it. One of those things is prestige platforms. So, an F-35, an F-16 Block V, even the Abrams tanks to some extent, the utility is not just in the operational side, but also in the sense that, if the Chinese shoot down one of these planes, it's another sign that the United States, by giving us or selling us these weapons, really values Taiwan.